Welcome to KRA's The Hub, the official podcast of KRA Corporation. And now get ready to hear workforce topics and trends you need to know on the go.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of KRA's The Hub. This is Doug Foresta. Of course, I'm excited to be here with Jonathan Overall. Also, our special guest today is DeVone Holt. He's a prominent figure in workforce development and organizational culture. And recently, DeVone made headlines when he announced that he'd be moving on from being the chief of external affairs at Goodwill Industries of Kentucky, where he did grassroots workforce development. Very excited to announce that he is moving into, or by the time that you listen to this, he will already have moved into being the CEO of the Muhammad Ali Center. So great to be here, Jonathan. Always great to be with you. DeVone, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you guys very much. I'm excited to have this conversation today.
Doug, thank you. It's always great to be with you, and DeVone as well. Congratulations on the new opportunity. We're excited for today's conversation and just really what has led up to this point in your career. And obviously, we're going to talk about that today, your role in workforce development, and really some of the areas that have really been a point of expertise for you in your career path. But before we get to that, walk us through your career path, starting from really your early professional experiences that led up to this point.
Well, you know, I tell folks, I call myself the Black Forrest Gump. and what I mean by that is if you watch the movie Forrest Gump, you know, he went from one incredible life experience to another, didn't plan it all, just really kind of stumbled into these great life experiences. And that's what my career has been like. I wish I could say I've planned all of this, but that was not at all the case. For me, I started off as a journalism and English major in college and thought I was going to graduate and become a reporter. And before I even graduated, I realized maybe that's not what I want to do. And so I pivoted and had a professor of mine literally on the day I graduated college who said to me, I know you don't have a clue what you're doing. I know some folks at the University of Kentucky who are hiring in their public relations department. And he sent me on a task to connect there, and that became my first job. And so from 95 to 98, I worked in the public relations department at the University of Kentucky and got recruited by UPS Airlines in Louisville, Kentucky to come down the road from Lexington to Louisville to manage some of the public relations work for UPS Airlines, which is headquartered in Louisville. And so that started me in a world of public relations, communications, marketing, advertising, those sort of things, which was really exciting. And got recruited to do some work for an internet startup company called Darwin Networks that was funded by folks like Paul Allen, the co-founder of Microsoft. It was the early days of the internet, and they dumped a ton of money in the company and needed somebody to manage their external affairs. And I did that, and I will tell you guys, it was the first time I really took a job for money. You know, they dangled a carrot in front of me, and I jumped at it. And it took me about 4 months after I started that job to realize that I was absolutely miserable and took the job for the wrong reason. And you won't hear many people say this, but I was very fortunate that company went out of business because it forced me to do something else and gave me a different perspective on why I should work and what should be my motivation for showing up in the workplace. And so a former colleague of mine at UPS had become the CEO of our local Chamber of Commerce here in Louisville, Kentucky, and told me I had some transferable skills and that I should come and work on his economic development team. Well, I laugh and I tell people that the kid who took one economics class at Eastern Kentucky University wound up becoming the city of Louisville's inner city economic development director. And I did that work for about 7 years and became so entrenched in that work, both locally and nationally, that I had cities recruiting me to come do workforce development, economic development, inner city revitalization work in their communities. And I got this bright idea, guys, instead of going to work for one of them, to open a consulting company and work for all of them. And I did, and life was great for about 2 years. And I was living the dream, was my own boss. I was making more money than I'd ever made. And one of my clients at the time happened to be Jefferson County Public Schools, the 25th at the time largest school district in the country. And the superintendent of the school district was really wanting to build stronger ties into the community from the school district, and was asking me to help him do that, and said to me, this becomes a lot easier if you come to work for me full time. And I told him no two times, and he asked me the third time, and he asked at the right time. And that started this journey for me into a more intense world of workforce development on the flip side of what many of us recognize, meaning that I worked in a field in public education where I recognized, based on the business partnerships that I managed, the external affairs relationships that were established, that I was helping to produce a product for the local businesses in our community, for citizens in our community who were relying on our young students to become sort of the next wave of leaders and workers. And so education for me took a different look and a different feel than I think most people have when they operate in the world of education. It, to me, was a solution to a problem that our community was facing. And so interestingly enough, if you follow the world of education, superintendents don't stay around too long in most school districts, and ours didn't. As great as he was, he's still a great friend of mine. He moved on, and as a result of him moving on, I moved on, and that's when I landed at Rescare Workforce Services. And I landed there, and I tell you what, it put me in the thick of this workforce development world, really starting to understand the value of workforce development, connecting with people. And my role was multifaceted. I did a lot of external affairs work, communications, marketing, government affairs, and a lot of sales at Rescare Workforce Services. But it gave me this well-rounded approach to being able to see the significance of workforce and how it impacts our world in many different ways.
Thanks so much, DeVone. So, all right, so let's talk about, as I mentioned, you've recently moved on as the Chief of External Affairs at Goodwill Industries of Kentucky. Talk a little bit about how your experience at Goodwill of Kentucky, how did it impact your perspective on workforce?
At Goodwill, a lot of people think Goodwill is just a thrift store where you can donate goods and pick up some thrift items. But the reality is, in Kentucky, Goodwill operates with a mission to help the hardest to serve job seekers in the market find stability in life through what Goodwill calls the power of work. And I got to see workforce in a completely different light, because at Goodwill, the people we served and were working to try to help by putting them in a position to live self-sufficient lifestyles with good quality employment opportunities. These were people with addiction histories, with disabilities, with little to no education, with little to no workforce experience, transportation challenges, childcare challenges. These were literally the hardest to serve job seekers in the market. And so when you're operating at that level, working to help people rebuild their lives, build value in the marketplace, you really start to understand the value of starting from scratch and helping people build second chances for themselves. And for me, I think what I walked away from that experience with is this understanding that with the right second chance or third chance or fourth chance or fifth chance in some cases, that people really can turn their lives around and become great contributors to our community. And the thing that I notice most is how those individuals are often overlooked, undervalued, and not considered as part of the workforce solution that we look for in communities around the country. We often overlook them. We often kind of push them to the side, hoping that we can find some better candidates somewhere else. But the reality is these men and women, unfortunately, exist in droves. And I think the solution in many of our communities, the workforce solutions in many of our communities, can be found in serving that population, helping them polish up themselves, develop some skills, getting them prepared for the workforce. I've seen it time and time again that when you do that and you do it well with that population, they will take those opportunities and they will work to impress you because they want a chance to contribute and live the American dream like all the rest of us do.
DeVone, one of the more important issues in workforce development is workforce culture.
Yes.
And I know you've coined the term the Trinity of workforce culture. Could you explain that concept to our listeners and some of the work that you've been involved with really sharing the impact of what that means?
Sure. A friend of mine and I we were sitting around one day just kind of talking about jobs and workforce, and he was asking me questions about the work that I did and how much I enjoyed it, and we essentially concluded that there were really three things that make up what we call the holy trinity of employment. And those three things were, one, you like what you do; two, you like who you do it with; and three, you get paid pretty good to do it. And I know that's a real simplistic approach to talking about workforce, but the more I really started to pay attention to the solutions we were trying to solve for in the world of workforce, it really kind of centered around those three things. Finding a way to put people in a position where they really are able to thrive because they enjoy what they do. They have a unique skill set to be able to do that thing. When people find themselves in that position, where they are passionate about what they do, they're really good at what they do, they are more likely to become a happier, more stable employee. But then when you add the fact that you can potentially surround them around people who they like, you think about how much time we spend at work. Those people often become our second families. And how miserable would it be? And it's been this case for me in some cases where you go to work and you really don't like the people you work with. That's a horrible, horrible experience. But if you really like the people you work with, that becomes a place where you enjoy being. You create this family environment, and people support one another in a way that helps you retain employees without having to go above and beyond as an employer, because you've got a culture now that's been established and is supported and sustained by your workforce, and not something that you as an employee have to carry singularly alone in that notion. And then the third thing is that hopefully you're able to have a job that pays you pretty well. And I think the thing that we often know, especially in the world of workforce, is that in many cases, many of us have contracts that dictate how we can pay the people who work for us, especially in the world of workforce. I know that's the case at KRA. It was the case at Rescue Workforce Services. We would get contracts, and those contracts would have boundaries that would prevent us from being able to pay people millions of dollars to do a job, right? And so we know that there were limits there. So there's limits in how you're able to pay people in some cases. And then the other piece of that equation, guys, I will tell you, is that we can't always dictate how happy someone is in their job. That's not something that you and I can produce for someone. We might be able to tweak some things in the workplace that make working a little easier and a little bit more enjoyable. But there's nothing that says that the people who come to work for us were born to do the things that they're going to come into our offices to do, which means we can't guarantee that they're going to love what they do. But there's one piece of that puzzle that I do believe we can control, and that's the second one. So if you like what you do, you like who you do it with, and you get paid pretty good, the second one is you like who you do it with. And that, to me, essentially is this notion of building a healthy workforce culture, hiring well, building an environment where people like coming to work, they enjoy working in those spaces, they feel valued, they feel appreciated, they feel seen, they feel like they're contributing to something positive, they feel like their employer is making a positive contribution to the society that they live in. If you as an employer can help, or as a leader in an environment, can help create that type of workforce environment, that type of workforce culture, I believe you will have a long list of employees who will identify themselves as happy in your workplace.
So, DeVone, let me ask you this. I think people innately understand that culture is important.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it can be difficult to measure. It can feel amorphous. Yeah. So, can you talk about what metrics or indicators can an organization use to measure workforce culture?
Well, I will tell you, I've worked a few places, and there's some folks who they kind of have a touchy-feely experience around workforce culture. And the one thing that I've come to realize is that you can't always determine exactly how well a workforce culture is, but it's pretty easy to determine when it's bad, right? I mean, we can pretty easily determine when a workforce culture is bad. But what I will tell you is, in my experience, I've no longer attempted to try to guess the health of my workforce culture. I've gone straight to the source, and I ask my employees what it's like, and that comes in different forms. One is workforce surveys, staff surveys, where I ask my staff to respond to questions anonymously. And it really is anonymous. Sometimes surveys are issued and people are really nervous because they feel like it can be traced back to them if they respond a certain way. But if you can issue anonymous surveys that allow them to speak freely about what their experience is like, I think you'll really start to build a clear assessment of what type of workforce culture you have. And I've done that. And I will tell you, in a few workforce environments I've been in, we've used that to gauge ourselves, to gauge departments, to gauge leaders, and use that as a benchmark to improve upon year after year after year. Turnover rate is another way that you can kind of gauge. Are people leaving pretty quickly for what appears to be no rational reason? Are they taking lateral moves to go somewhere else? Are they going to work somewhere else for a quarter or 50 cents more than what they were making in your shop? That's a clear sign. Absenteeism rates. And then when they do leave, one of the things that I think is valuable for every organization to do is conduct exit interviews. Spend some time talking to people who are leaving. At that point, they have absolutely nothing to lose. And it might sound morbid, but I love reading exit interviews because it gives you the most authentic, realistic understanding of what people think of your workforce environment. And to me, I think that's the telltale sign of whether or not you have a good work environment or not so good work environment.
DeVone, probably one of the hardest things in an organization is to actually bring about the change. Cultures can become established, entrenched, even with the shift of employees that come in during a given period of time. But for the leaders that are out there, what would your advice be to effectively communicate and champion cultural changes throughout an organization?
Well, I'll tell you what's worked for me, and I won't pretend that it's been 100% effective. Every once in a while, there's a dud that'll slip through the cracks. But for me, that process literally starts when I'm interviewing for candidates. I don't wait until they get there to start talking about workforce culture. I explain to them a philosophy that I have. And I will tell you, anybody that's worked for me in the last 10 years will tell you, they will tell you very clearly a philosophy that I have. It's the DeVone Holt philosophy. And that's a philosophy that says that you can't, I have what's called a no jerk policy. A no jerk policy. It means that you can't work for me and be a jerk. Or better yet, you can't work for me very long and be a jerk. Because I've had some people who've tested my theory and they learned the hard way that I meant that I would not create an environment where people were disrespectful, where people were rude, where people operated with no morals and values and little integrity. Those are things that I really mean. And I model them as a leader, but I set the tone in that conversation in the interview setting, because here's what I've concluded is that, again, I said this before, I work hard, guys. And when I go to work, I give my all, which means that I'm probably spending a lot more than 8 hours a day in the workplace. And the last thing I want to do is be in a space where I'm working that long and I'm working that hard with people who are jerks. I've worked for some jerks before, and I will tell you, it is just not pleasurable. And I've concluded that would not be the type of culture I would manage or create when I became the leader. And so this no jerk policy is one that works only if the CEO embraces it, only if the leader the department leaders, the directors, the vice presidents, only if those department heads embrace that notion. It can't be something that you put on someone else. You have to model the behavior. You have to make the commitment. You have to show them what that looks like. And to me, that's the start of healthy culture. And then the other one is just really spending time with your team, understanding what the pain points are, understanding what challenges they have outside of the workforce that are impacting how they work in the workforce, and understand that as much as we hire people to do jobs, that the people that we hire are real human beings with real lives and real responsibilities outside the workplace that impact how they work in the workplace. And so my strategy has always been to try as best I can. I won't pretend that it's always been perfect and that I've knocked it out of the park in every scenario, but it's me trying to operate with empathy in the environments where I work, understanding that these are real people with real world challenges that impact them, and figure out how we manage their challenges to complement the work that we need to get done. And when I've approached my work and my staffs and building culture that way, I will tell you, I've had a lot more victories than I've had defeats.
DeVone, this has been amazing. Thank you for sharing your perspective with us. Before we wrap up, I really just want to ask you one last question. So I'm certain that we have some workforce leaders listening to this podcast, or people that want to become workforce leaders. So I'd love to just get your perspective on any advice that you would share for emerging workforce leaders or otherwise about how to positively impact the organization's culture.
Again, I start with the simple notion of getting out of your office. I know a lot of leaders who have the title of leader and think that's sufficient. It's not. Just because you have the title as vice president, CEO, director, or whatever that might be, that makes you a leader on paper, but it really doesn't make you a leader of people. Best way to determine if you're leading people is to look behind and see if there's somebody following you. And if there's no one following you, as the saying goes, you're not leading, you're just out taking a long walk. And so the notion for me is to make sure that you are building connections with the people that you're leading, truly understanding them. It's great to read books. It's great to go to workshops. It's great to do all of those professional development things. And it really is. I'm not knocking those. But there's nothing that will beat being able to connect with your employees and understand what it is that motivates them, understand what challenges they face, and operate as a coach, like a coach would in a sporting environment, and figure out how you maximize the potential of those people who are showing up to help you deliver results. And recognize that team is made up of people with different skill sets, different challenges, different strengths and weaknesses, and get really creative in blending that together to create an environment where good can happen. It takes work, but being a great leader, I will tell you, is not something that happens for lazy leaders. You can't be a lazy leader and trust that you're going to be able to build a healthy work environment. You got to get your hands dirty. You got to get out of the office, spend some time with your team, and that's where the magic happens.
DeVone, I just want to thank you again for today's conversation. I think it's such a relevant topic for workforce and really any organization out there. And you brought so much insight to our audience, those that are in workforce development, and even outside of that, business owners that are looking to improve and enhance upon their workforce culture. If folks are interested in staying in touch with the work that you're doing, what would be the best place for them to follow you and your work?
I'm easy to find on social media, on Holt, DeVone. The last name is Holt. Fortunately, there's not many DeVone Holt. So if you go see the bald-headed black guy on social media, that's probably me, DeVone Holt.
Hey, well, we know where to find you. And again, listening to today's conversation and how this work is actually being implemented and impacting so many. So, DeVone, thank you. Again, congratulations. Look forward to following the work that you're going to be doing in your upcoming venture, and look forward to future conversations with you.
Excellent, guys. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Take care.
Thank you for listening to KRA's The Hub. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts. To learn more about KRA Corporation, visit www.kra.com. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll be back soon with a new episode.